So in this lesson, we're just going to run through a problem that involves using the various laws of probability that we've talked about in other lessons. So the setting here is that we have two football matches, and we have United versus City and Rovers versus Wanderers. And I'm not saying where these United, City, Rovers and Wanderers come from. They're just some generic football teams. And so they're playing two matches. United are playing against City and Rovers are playing against Wanderers. And we can estimate the probabilities of various outcomes. So we estimate that the probability that United win is 0.5, the probability of a draw is 0.3. And we estimate that the probability that Rovers win is 0.2 and the probability that Wanderers win is 0.6. And there are some underlying assumptions here. So the main one is that we're assuming that the matches are independent of each other, so that any event concerning the United versus City match is independent of any event concerning the Rovers versus Wanderers match. And also we're assuming that the only possible outcomes are in each match are either a win for one of the teams or a draw. Right, so there are three possible outcomes. They're not equally likely outcomes, but those are the three possible outcomes in each match. And the problem is to calculate the probabilities of various events, and we've listed some events here that we want the probabilities of. So let's go through this. Okay, so the first one, we want to calculate the probability that City win. So that's just to do with the United versus City match. And so what do we have here? We know the probability of United win, the probability of a draw, and the only other outcome is the City win. And one of the basic facts about probability is that the sum of all the probabilities of all of the outcomes must be 1. So whatever this number in here, the probability of a City win is, it must be the number so that when I add up these three numbers, this one, and whatever this here is, I'm going to get 1. So I need 0.5 plus 0.3 plus whatever my answer is has to be 1. And now I can solve that equation pretty quickly and see that this question mark here has to be 0.2. So the answer here is 0.2. The probability of a City win is 0.2. Okay, so that's easy. That just uses the fact that the sum of the probabilities of all the outcomes has to be 1. Alright, what about part B? The probability of a United win and a Wanderers win. So here we're going to use the multiplication rule for independent events. So what that tells us is that this is going to be the probability of a United win times the probability of a Wanderers win. Because our assumption is that these matches are independent, that they're independent trials. So any event in the United City match is independent of any event in the Rovers Wanderers match. So now we know these two probabilities here. The probability of United win is 0.5 and the probability of a Wanderers win is 0.6. So our answer here is 0.5 times 0.6, and that comes out to be 0.3. You can do that in your head, or you could do it with a calculator if you want. Okay, so that's just using the multiplication rule for independent events. So when the two events are independent, then the probability that both occur is just the product of the individual probabilities. Okay, now what about the probability that neither match ends in a draw? So what do we want to do here? We want to break this up into events for each match, right? We want to describe this overall event here, that neither match ends in a draw, in terms of each individual match. Well, neither match ending in a draw is the same as saying that United City is not a draw, and Rovers Wanderers is not a draw. Okay, so let me continue this one down here, but we need a bit more room. So I'll just continue this calculation here. So now we can use the multiplication rule because United City and Rovers Wanderers are independent. So now what's the probability that United City is not a draw? So the probability of United City not a draw. And that's going to be multiplied by the probability that Rovers Wanderers is not a draw. Okay, so now I have to work out these two individual probabilities here. Well, United City, I know that the probability that United win is 0.5, the probability of draw is 0.3, and we've just worked out that the probability of City winning is 0.2. So the probability of it not being a draw is 0.5 plus 0.2, right? So that's 0.7. So the probability of United City not being a draw is 0.7. And by the same kind of reasoning, the probability of Rovers Wanderers not being a draw is 0.2 plus 0.6, so that's 0.8. So overall, this probability is 0.7 times 0.8, which is 0.56. Okay, so that's the answer to part C. Now finally, the answer to part D, the probability that at least one match ends in a draw. Well, if you think about it, this is obviously very closely related to part C because this event here, that at least one match ends in a draw, is the complement of this event that neither match ends in a draw. If it's not true that neither match ends in a draw, then at least one match ends in a draw. So you have to think through that logic carefully. But basically, this event in part D here is essentially the opposite of this event. So what that means is that there's a nice relationship between the probabilities. The probability of at least one draw is going to be 1 minus the probability of neither match ending in a draw, and we just worked that out to be 0.56. So for part D, this is part D here, we get 1 minus 0.56, and that's 0.44. So the probability that at least one of the matches ends in a draw is 0.44. Now, there's another way to do that, and we'll just check that it works. We could do that using the addition rule, and we'll check that we get the same answer. This is also equal to the probability of United City drawing plus the probability of Rovers Wanderers drawing minus the probability of both of these happening and Rovers Wanderers draw. So let's see that we get the same answer. So this, the probability of a United City draw, so I'll have to scroll up now to read off some of these from the table. The probability of a United City draw, remember that's 0.3. So let's put that in there. That's 0.3. The probability of a Rovers Wanderers draw, well, what's that? We've left that blank for the moment, but we can easily fill it in. That's going to be 0.2 because these probabilities all have to add up to 1. Okay, so we have 0.2 there. And what's the probability of both of them happening? Well, that's minus 0.3 times 0.2 because they're independent. But what's 0.3 times 0.2? That's 0.06. So we get 0.3 plus 0.2 minus 0.06, and surprise, surprise, that comes out to be 0.44. So the addition law method, that agrees with our multiplication law method. Okay, so that's just a quick example of some applications of our rules of probability.